Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. Hello, welcome back. So I'm here with a new sketchbook spread for you guys, and this one is super exciting. So I recently ordered some screen tones online directly from the Deleter shop, Deleter being the brand that produces these from Japan. And it was actually a pretty good experience. Like, I have come across the Deleter website before, but it looked kind of complicated and outdated, so I never bothered ordering screen tones from there before. And I was kind of waiting for an opportunity to come across them in person, but unfortunately, the only place I knew that carried them, which was the Japanese bookstore called Kinokuniya, apparently no longer carries them from what I can tell, so I just, decided to go ahead and try ordering from the Deleter website, and it was actually pretty good. The shipping was quick, and I think the pricing seemed like the most reasonable pricing I've seen around. So yeah, finally got them. Super excited to use them at long last. I've been really wanting to for a long time now. There's some artists that I follow on Instagram, on YouTube, who seem to use them. I'm not 100% sure if they do, because sometimes it's hard to tell whether people add the screen tones in a digital program after taking a photo or if they actually do it physically, but it doesn't really matter. Like, this is one of those things that I was gonna bring up. Like, I know that it's pretty much impossible to tell if you post a photo digitally whether it was done by hand or not, but what I like so much about screen tones is that it's just a really fun medium, and like, it just requires kind of a different skill set, which I am super rusty in, as you will probably be able to see later in this video. But yeah, I've been kind of wanting to try them out again. I have tried using them before, and this was probably like 12 years ago, I'm gonna say. At least 10 years ago. It was a really long time ago, and I was in high school at the time, and I remember using them to do a bunch of commissions. It was around the time when I just started doing commissions, actually. But yeah, it was really fun, and I really like looking back at those drawings, some of which I still have. And so here we are. I actually haven't drawn in my sketchbook in quite a long time, and by that I mean like a couple of weeks or something. And so I did feel pretty rusty going into it, even though I always preach that it's super important to do warm-ups. As usual, I jumped into the sketchbook session without doing any warm-ups, and as a result I actually had a really hard time getting started, which is why I decided to include the first segment, just because, even though I ended up erasing everything there, just to show you guys that sometimes, like, I know it looks like it's super easy and like fast and effortless with the result, but I do have some struggles with getting into it pretty often, especially if I kind of fall out of the habit of drawing in my sketchbook frequently. And so I included a little bit of useless footage to prove the difficulty, yes. But anyways, as you can see, eventually I kind of ended up finding my footing, and even though I wasn't super happy with the sketch that you see me drawing here right now, I just decided to, do the best with it and just kind of roll with it, because at this point I have already erased maybe 3 or 4 sketches that I didn't like, so I figured it's either I'm going to erase this again and completely lose any motivation to keep going, or I'm just gonna keep, like, beating at it until it looks okay. So that's kind of what I decided to do. Yeah, and I actually also want to mention that before this particular sketchbook session, I actually had a couple of failed ones, like at least one failed one where I spent some time making sketches, none of which I liked, so it's just like, okay, it's not happening. So I just gave up and decided to try again another time, which is, it's always kind of disappointing, obviously, when this happens, and it's always surprising that even after having drawn so much for so many years, it's still something that happens. But yeah, just so you guys know, it does kind of happen indefinitely, and I don't know if it ever will end. So the easiest way to deal with it is to just kind of accept it as part of the process, and to take a break if necessary. So I digress. yeah, I didn't really have any particular plan going into this sketchbook spread, and all I really wanted to do was to draw this character that I'm currently sketching, which is Sweet. The biggest reason being why I kind of don't draw her very often in my sketchbook, because her darker skin tone makes it difficult for me to I don't know, like fill it in, and I don't like not filling it in. So I just kind of avoid drawing her in my sketchbook for the most part. Usually when I use ink, it kind of ends up being splotchy, which is really annoying. So after doing that like a few times in the past, I just started avoiding drawing her. And the only medium that I've been able to do her justice with has been gouache up until this point, but because I got the screen tones, I figured this is the perfect opportunity to finally give my girl a nice smooth skin tone. So that's the reason why I wanted to draw her. And I kind of just like filled the page with a few sketches that I like of both of them, Sweet and Zero, who typically I draw as a pair. And that was the gist of it. I didn't really think too hard about it, and this was kind of like a warm-up thing where I just wanted to test the screen tones. I was super excited to use them. And of course, since the screen tones are kind of like a traditional Japanese manga material, I wanted to ink the sketches with plain black ink without diluting it like I typically do. And I was kind of excited about that too. As you guys may have seen a couple of videos ago, I did kind of go back to just using black ink without diluting it, and it was a lot of fun. I really liked the result, and it is the previous page in the sketchbook. But yeah, so sketching it out really took some patience from me, and as you can see, I included some parts where I would erase certain facial features and draw things over again. Something that I thought I'd point out is actually I tend to erase the most when it comes to facial features, and not a whole lot of other aspects of the drawing or other parts of the drawing, because I'm trying really hard to get a character's likeness, and it's something that I wanted to bring up in this video that I've been struggling with lately, because I've been doing so much freelance work the past few years, and I obviously do a lot of personal work on the side, and I do post it quite frequently, and the volume does look like it's a lot if you just look at my Instagram feed, but in reality it's not nearly as much as I would like to, and it's pretty difficult for me to have a firm hold on stylistic proportions that I prefer, and to kind of just like retain the style that I personally want to achieve, because when I do my freelance work, oftentimes I have to change the proportions quite a bit, especially in the face, and that's been this big area of struggle for me for the past like 3 or 4 years, because every time I do a medium length project that requires me to adjust my style, even if the adjustment doesn't appear to be big, just having to do different proportions for the characters' faces really messes me up kind of in the long run, because I find it really difficult to find the rhythm of the proportions that I preferred previously. So this is kind of the struggle that you're witnessing with me trying to sketch these faces. And I will say, like, these, like, maybe you remember me mentioning this before, but I can't even afford to aim for total perfection here, because I know that it'll just take forever and I'm likely to give up. So I'll typically like just roll with it as soon as I find it acceptable and not necessarily perfect. And that's basically what you're looking at right here. Yeah, I think one of my plans going forward is, as some of you guys know, I talk quite a bit, or mention quite a bit, my ongoing personal project, which is my comic series called Gloaming Veil. So I have been slowly like rolling back into that, and I'll talk about that more in a upcoming video, but I will just mention it here. Something that I realize that I need to do in order to solve this style crisis problem is to do character sheets with their faces exactly how I want them to be, or like the main characters' faces exactly how I want them to be, to kind of just like hammer down the proportions until I'm very happy with them, and do, you know, a bunch of things like poses, expression sheets. And I think that'll really help me kind of get a grip on the style, first of all, and then hopefully going forward I will be able to refer to these sheets as I start working on the actual pages. So yeah, that's something I'm really looking forward to, and I will definitely be making videos about it, so stay tuned for that. Before I continue, I want to tell you guys about this really helpful little class I just found on Skillshare. So if you've never heard of Skillshare before, it is an online community for people who love to learn new skills and expand their creative interests. I usually check out illustration, fine art, and productivity sections myself, but there are a huge variety of creative topics to explore, now including music and cooking. So this class I stumbled upon is called Designing the Life You Want: 4 Exercises for Clarity and Motivation by Michelle B. I did something very similar to this class several years back, and it was one of the most crucial steps for me to take to get my life and goals together. I think it's super important to do things like this at least every couple of years in order to gauge where you are in terms of your goals and to create a clear vision of your life. So I'd highly recommend the short little class if you feel a bit stagnant or unsure how to make long-term goals. I really enjoyed it. It's super quick, and there are exercise sheets that you can fill out that are included in the class. So yeah, Skillshare is full of useful things like this, and if you'd like to sign up, check out the link below. The first 1,000 people who use the link in my description will receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare Premium. And now back to the video. But yeah, so as you can see at this point, I am moving on to the inking stage of the sketchbook spread. It did take me a while to hammer down the sketches, but as soon as I did, I was very glad to move on to the inking stage. So the first thing that I noticed when I started inking is, even though I sketched for quite some time, I kind of forgot how I approached inking, and I was very unnecessarily careful with it at first. And then eventually I realized that the G-nib is actually super forgiving and pretty easy to use. So I managed to loosen up by like the midpoint of inking this first drawing of 0. And I don't really know if there's much I want to comment on in regards to the inking process, except for this. Yeah, so at least like every other sketchbook spread, I will do something like that. And you know, I guess it's just part of the process. Thankfully, at the end of the day, you can't really see the smudge too well at the very end anyways, but yeah, I was pretty upset with myself for letting that happen again. But yeah, so usually how I approach inking these things, even if it's just for fun, I mean, I kind of approach it the same way for finished pieces as well. But yeah, I will do the line work first for the most part, and just leave the big areas that need to be painted black for last, which you will see me do shortly. In case you're curious for the specific ink that I'm using here, I am using the Dr. P.H. Martin's Black Star ink, the matte version. There's also a shiny version, which is called High Carb. I've tried that one as well, but I really prefer the matte ink. It's so smooth, and obviously it's not shiny, according to the description. I mean, matte. Anyways, yeah, that's one of my favorite inks to use, especially for sketchbooks. I don't know if there's like a super huge difference between this one and other black inks, but I can't really put my finger on it, but there is something smoother about it. I feel like it is smoother and a little bit more dense, so I do really like this ink a lot, and it is the one that I tend to use the most. So once I finished doing the line art, I decided to switch to a brush to fill in her hair because I figured it would be much faster. Even though it is a little bit more challenging to control the lines when I use a brush, it's still obviously worthwhile because it is so much faster to fill in the big black areas that way. So some of you guys who follow this channel and watch most of my videos might know the last video that I posted was on the topic of AI art, which is, I mean, I don't really care to discuss that here, but I wanted to say that I'm super thankful for everybody who took the time to respond. And there were a lot of interesting conversations that took place in the comment section, and I'm glad to have read a bunch of wildly varying opinions on the matter. So yeah, but anyways, I wanted to bring that up because actually ever since I made that video, or ever since I was thinking about the whole thing, it actually really kind of consumed me, and I thought about it a lot every day for a couple of weeks, and I still do. My mind just tends to go there pretty frequently, and I like to keep updated on what's going on in regards to the situation in the art community. So I just wanted to mention one of the things that are super promising that I found out about is that there is a concept art association type of organization which looks out for I guess the concept artists or artists' well-being as communal. I don't really know how to describe it, but the point is there is an organization that has been putting effort into at least communicating with the right people and posing the questions and figuring out how to approach the situation. And I think Carla Ortiz, the artist, I don't know if you guys are familiar with her, but she's a concept artist and a painter, and I'm a big fan of her work. I've followed her for quite a few years. Anyways, I think she's kind of spearheading this situation, and there is a town hall that they had a couple, like last week I think, that was 2 hours long, and there was a detailed presentation about like what's happening, like how the technology works, and it was super informative. Like I already knew kind of the bare bones of the situation, but in that particular video I found out a lot of things that I didn't know previously, and it is very interesting, and it is good to know, I think. And so yeah, I'm generally speaking, I just wanted to give you guys a quick update on the fact that, you know, things are being done, and I just wanted to mention that there is a lot of like panicking I've noticed in the art community, and I think panic is generally not the best reaction to anything really. So, you know, I just wanted to say a couple of words of encouragement that, you know, I think it's probably way too soon to panic, and it's never good to panic anyways. And if you do feel really kind of anxious about this, try to just distance yourself from it, because there are people who are trying to look out for the best interest of artists and those who will be affected or might be affected or are affected now, and that it's not like we're just sitting around and doing nothing collectively. So yeah, there's definitely some solace in that, and we'll see how the situation progresses and we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, I wanted to mention that it actually made me really kind of take a different look at traditional artwork versus digital artwork. I mean, who's to say where the technology is going to go, but at least for the time being, I find it like not even, I don't know, it seems like we're really, really far off from AI being able to do anything traditionally. So in that way, I think one of the interesting things that's going to happen is that traditional art might actually kind of resurface again and experience like a mini renaissance. I mean, I can feel it even within myself, because I'm very, very 50-50 when it comes to digital and traditional art, and I really do honestly enjoy both pretty equally. But I've noticed over the last several years, like when I started doing more and more, or at least not doing more and more, but publishing and sharing more and more of my traditional artwork for the most part, because most of my digital work tends to be for clients. I do think that the response from the general public is a lot more enthusiastic and positive towards my traditional work, and that's something that I was like loosely aware of before, but now if I really think about it, I think there is something very special about traditional work, and I do even personally feel very giddy and very excited to look at other fellow artists' traditional artwork, paintings and sketchbook pages, sketchbooks in person. it's such a completely different experience. It's you can't even compare it to looking at photos, honestly. Even though photos still look pretty cool, yeah, touching original artwork is something else entirely. And I think that that's the one thing that digital art will never have and will never be able to replicate, as unfortunate as it is. But yeah, I brought that up because, after the whole AI thing became like a big recurring thought for me for the past couple of weeks, traditional art has really become much more attractive to me than it was before. And to the point where now I'm even considering like how to approach working on my comic project. I think I am starting to kind of toy with the idea of maybe even trying to draw some of it traditionally if I can, because even though it might be more time consuming, it might require extra materials, but I think it might be worthwhile, just based on how I feel about the whole situation now and based on the response that other people have to my work. But yeah, I think that is a topic to be explored on another day, and I kind of digress. So yeah, as you can see at this point in the video, I am finally using the screen tones, and I was very disappointed to find out that I was doing a very sloppy job at cutting them out. Like when I remove the strips of screen tone stickers to discard, I noticed like I couldn't even follow the lines properly, and there are a lot of overlaps. Or sorry, like I don't even know. Basically, I was not very good at cutting them out. But thankfully, it's somewhat easy to fix. And I do think one of the issues here is that I tend to draw kind of tiny, so it's difficult to be precise. Also, one of the things that I was kind of unsure about is how hard I can afford to press on the X-Acto knife, because I really didn't want to cut through the page and damage the next paper. But thankfully, this sketchbook is very nice. It has very thick paper, so there was like, it didn't even show at all on the other side of the page, which was a big relief. So yeah, by the way, the sketchbook I got from a fellow artist called Tricky Wagon or such. Please check out her work. I'll try to remember to link it in the description. I do really like this sketchbook, so I would highly recommend it. But yeah, I kind of got a little bit better with the precision aspect of it as I went along, which, it's pretty normal. That's what tends to happen. But I was very rusty. I actually didn't expect it to be kind of as difficult as it is, but I think that's what makes it so fun. And one of the things that I didn't do too much last time I used screen tones was scratch off the surface of them for highlights, and I had just had a blast doing that. I think it's so fun. It's such an interesting technique. Like, I know that it's very straightforward, but I've honestly I never used mediums that kind of have the scratching as part of the possibilities. So this was super fresh and new, and as a result, a ton of fun to explore. Yeah, and like I mentioned, usually when people post artwork online, photos of their sketchbooks, it's difficult to tell if the screen tones were added digitally or on the actual paper. I think for the most part, people tend to add them digitally in Photoshop or like Clip Studio or something like that. But it doesn't matter. I mean, the point that I was trying to make is that this isn't really something that's very practical at all, and I can totally see that, but it's just a lot of fun to play with. And the most special aspect of it is that it is actually on paper, so that even if you think that it's not worth the effort and the money to, get the screen tones and do this by hand, because it's so much easier and so much faster to do it digitally afterwards, I do think there's something special about having this directly on the page and to be able to flip through the sketchbook and just see the screen tones. It's pretty cool. It's also like, a throwback. I used to read a lot of manga when I was younger, and it was super inspiring to me. So now being able to create results that I'm pretty happy with, that I was nowhere near being able to do back in the day. It is pretty satisfying on like a personal level. So yeah, like once I finished adding in the screen tones, I wanted to add some shading on Zero's face as well with the screen tones, but since it was so tiny, I was like, okay, I think it's just too small. The pieces that I would need are too small, so I decided to dilute a little bit of black ink, and I was surprised how well it actually went on top of screen tones. So on the picture, on the illustration that's the bottom right, I put some shading on Sweet's face over top of the screen tones, and it totally didn't smudge and it dried very quickly, and so it's very easy to use those things on top of each other, which is a nice little discovery, because for some reason I kind of assumed that it would smudge or like it wouldn't. I don't know. But yeah, and lastly, I for some reason decided to pull out a Tombow marker and give the bottom illustration a little outline. And yeah, overall, super pleased with the results of this page. It was a ton of fun. I think next time I will want to bring a little bit of color in, even though the black and white looks pretty good to me, and I am happy with how it turned out. I think I want to try to kind of expand the mixed media look, since screen tones are basically just like transparent stickers. There are a ton of stickers that I have that I could potentially use in similar ways, I just realized, and it's something that I really don't do often enough, and I'm kind of starting to loosen up just slightly in my sketchbook and realizing that I don't have to be so cut and dry about it. So yeah, I'm really glad I was finally able to share this process with you guys, and let me know what you think about screen tones. Let me know if you've ever tried them before, and I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. And I will be back with another one soon. Bye!